This is really exciting episode. I've been
Yeah,
talking to Dr. Zach a couple of times
for
and
sure.
invited him on. So you are the owner and founder of Luminous Chiropractic,
Yes.
head practitioner.
Yep.
And you've been in business how many years now?
We just, for this practice, just had our 2-year anniversary earlier in October.
Congrats.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you multiple questions today because you have a really strong philosophy behind
Yeah.
healing,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it informs a lot of your business practices.
For sure.
And you're in a really interesting space too, because chiropractic is moving more into, well, we talked about there being a division between holistic practice that is
Sure.
integrative
Yeah.
versus kind of the traditional methods
Yeah.
of chiropractic care,
For sure.
right? And on this, what I talk a lot to business owners about is really how your psychology and your mindset and your philosophy affect your business and decisions you've had to make as a business owner, and how that plays out in your industry and just as a human being. So yeah, welcome on, man.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
On.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
What's one thing you want people to know about your practice and the philosophy that drives Luminous Chiropractic for you?
The biggest thing that we're always striving to, I guess, bring to the community, kind of feel like the overall message, whether it be in-person conversations or on social media or whatever it is, any content that we're putting out, any interaction that we're having with people, kind of that foundational piece and kind of that overarching message is that, we believe that everybody has the ability to adapt and heal, right? To reorganize, to change, and to reconnect and get back to, or even experience for the first time, right, the really abundant levels of health that we were designed to have. Right. So it just comes from this more, this vitalistic principle of like that the body is really, really smart, right? That it was created intelligently with just an amazing amount of intelligence to not just survive, but to thrive.
Yeah.
Right. So that's in everything we're doing. Like that's our baseline and our foundation of like, we're coming from that. Hey, you're actually the healer, right? Me as the chiropractor, it is not, right? I'm how I talk is like, I'm the man in the middle, right? I'm just the mediator, if you will, the person that's just kind of nudging a kiddo, a person, whoever, be a family, right, back in a direction towards that thriving and towards that health, right?
Yeah.
That just comes from how we'll describe it, the inside out, right? Not the outside in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Amazing. Which kind of flies in the face of Western medicine a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a contrast to that message.
So you're not a band-aid for the spine.
Correct. Yes. And that's, and that's more or less kind of what you hinted at, kind of the traditional or more the mainstream thought behind chiropractic is that we're just like spine specialists and that, just come in and get adjusted when you do need that Band-Aid or you're in crisis, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to here to put that down, right? I myself went to a chiropractor for the first time in that situation, right? But kind of through that experience, getting a chiropractor was introduced to more of the full story, right? Of not just limiting it to that back pain, neck pain, headache model, right? And giving people the opportunity to step into something a little bit different, in my opinion, a little bit not just different, but more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And could you tell me last time we talked, you had the phrase that drives Luminous.
Yeah.
The impetus of that entire, how that all got set up. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So that, from one of my greatest mentors, right? His name is Dr. Arnaud Bernier. He fortunately passed last year. A true, just warrior for chiropractic, just full of light, full of love, but just stood on his principles and what he knew to be true. Right. He actually started in the medical model as, growing up, he was going to medical school. He went, his first chiropractor, won't go into the full story about, kind of how he got there, but went to his first chiropractor in France. he sits down, he's going through the whole thing, how we've all done, going to a doctor and you tell him like the whole story, what's going on, how we got here, how you're feeling, all that stuff, and his chiropractor just listened, heard him out. And at the end of that, his response to all of that was, I can do nothing for what's wrong with you, but I can work with what's right in you. We can't fight the darkness. We must turn on the light. Mm. We cannot fight disease. We must turn on life. And I heard him say that for the first time, 6 months in the chiropractic school. And he was in our school auditorium and the gym where we had every single chiropractic student in there, right? Every week listening to a speaker, right? So there's 1,500 plus students in there, man. You could hear a pin drop when he's talking, man. He had such a presence about him where he just stood in one spot and he could just like orate to a crowd and just like captivate everybody. And I'm sitting there in like the second or third row, just like hearing him say that. I'm like, yep, that's what I needed to hear, right? This old saying, once you hear truth, you can't unhear it, right? And that just rung so loud within me and just like hit my soul on a whole level that I like had never been just like, yes, that's it. And I was like, I need to learn, I need to know more about that. Like, what does that like mean? Like, what's the foundation of that? Like, how do you even arrive to that point to be able to like deliver that message to somebody with confidence and clarity, right? So I did. I started following, started learning more from it. But that is where the name Luminous more or less came from, was from that quote.
Yeah.
Right. Jokingly tell people it's like 95% of that comes from that, right? The other 5% of it comes from my my nerdy, geeky side of like loving Star Wars and stuff like that. There's a quote from Yoda in one of the movies, we are not, what is it? We are not
crude matter.
Crude matter, right? We are not just crude matter. We are
luminous beings.
Luminous beings. Thank you. Yes, right. That's
so careful doing Star Wars with me. We'll wreck this whole podcast.
That's awesome. But that's the other 5% is like hearing him say that. I'm like, yes, we're not just crude matter. We are luminous beings, luminous light.
Yeah.
Yes, right. We all have light within us. Chiropractic's just here to help it shine.
Wow, fantastic. That's so the reason
easy and simple as that.
The reason I knew that quote is because it came into my mind randomly the other day, and I was just like running through it in my head. So, there's a whole philosophy on that too. Fantastic. Sure. On the business side of it, that's a great driving philosophy. Mm-hmm. Great driving philosophy. And the cool thing you've done is a lot of business owners or potential business owners have something in them like that they want to share with the world. But you've also done the tough work of the medical side, bettering yourself, practicing, understanding what it's like to lease a commercial space for changing to this new commercial space you have.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about like the psychology of, I don't know if grittiness is the word, but you've gone through the trenches of like opening this, even though it's a beautiful space that feels healing and restorative here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Trust is the big part, I think, that we have leaned into, right? We have that philosophy I just talked about, about how, health, healing, well-being happens, right? That it does happen when we give it an opportunity to happen, right? That it's just kind of ingrained in us. But even in those parts of like making the jump from leaving my associate position to jumping into this practice full time, to then within the first 5 months of jumping into this, to then jumping into a space that was 6 times as big as the space we were in, right? Of just like, wait a minute, like logically, a lot of times it doesn't make sense of like, if we looked at everything, it's like, well, maybe we're not 100% ready to do that, but we were 100% ready to do it like on the, just like the energetic side of things, right? And it might sound a little weird or like people might not know what I'm talking about, but just like getting into space of like, we're ready for that growth, right? Of just like trusting, like, no, we need to make that decision now to then allow all the other things to happen once we make that decision. And all the other things meaning, right, we were growing in that other space, right? But to give the listeners some context, right? Our first space for Luminous was 400 square feet, right? We had a very small reception area and one room where I did everything in, right? Once I made that jump to go all in January of 2025, so this year, it's very new, right? It was like once I made that jump, it was like somebody flipped a switch and it was like, okay, we're ready. And we just started getting busier, and like it just started snowballing and like growing. And it was like, I've learned enough from my coaches and mentors and things like that. I've learned is like, hey, when that starts to happen, like you need to start making decisions for the future before that, so you're not stuck, right? And I saw it coming. It was just like, hey, 400 square feet is not very big when we specialize in taking care of kids, pregnant moms, families, right? You put 2 families of 4 in 400 square feet and it is snug, right? So it's like, wait a minute, we're starting to see more of this. We got to get ahead of this and get more space to then allow for the growth that's happening to continue to expand, right? So it's just having that trust and like, nope, we got to go now. And our lease wasn't up at that old office until September of this year, right? We moved into this new space in May. So it's like we had to like figure it out of like, we got to get out of that lease to get into this lease, because if we wait till September, we're going to be stuck, right? Our growth is going to get bottlenecked because we're not going to have the physical space to take care of the people we need that are wanting our care, right? And it was just one of those moments. It's just trusting of like, nope, this is the decision. And it's so interesting in life, all the things that have like led me to this place that I'm in right now, right? I go back and think about it often. It's like, man, it's like every time something like that's happened, it's come down to a decision where it was just like, yes, I'm doing that, without any like conscious like rebuttal against it. It was like, nope, got to do it, with no other instead of like, no, that's just the decision that needs to be made, even if it doesn't, like somebody else probably doesn't sound right, which I've learned to like not tell everybody all the things, because they can kind of talk you out of the stuff, right?
They'll use logic on you.
Right? But it's like in those instances, logic isn't what, for me at least, it's like logic can't drive that decision, because logic will probably pull me out of the decision I need to make, right? In every step across, even going to chiropractic school was not a logical thing, right? I went to chiropractic school 9 months after getting adjusted for the first time. That doesn't make sense to a lot of people, right? Moved there with my girlfriend, now wife, to Atlanta, right? 9 months after we started dating. Like none of that makes sense, right? None of like all along the way, none of it makes any logical sense. But it does make sense when you start realizing, wait a minute, like for me, like there's a guiding like presence there of like, nope, we're going this way. We're going this way. And just like getting ego and logic out of the way and just like letting that guide me. And it has yet to fail me. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of how we got here, right? Of like going through that and just like, nope, it's time to go now. And it's worked out beautifully, right? We found this space. Our old landlords found somebody to take over our space where we only had 1 month of overlap.
Wow.
But that month of overlap was the month that we were doing renovations here. So we weren't paying here. So we were only still paying one. And it's like, as soon as that one dropped off, we started our new rent, and everything just fell into place. But I could have never logically made it happen that way. Sure. It was just having the trust to know, like, no, like it's going to happen. Right. Yeah. And even like my wife, right, Jessica, like is the co-owner of the business on like more of the administrative, like the office side of things. Right. She was like, what if like we have 2 rents, like we can, it was like, and I just remember it's going to happen. It's going to be fine. It will work itself out. Like we just have to move forward in that faith and the trust and know that it's going to work.
Sure.
Right. Because if we don't, we're going to get stuck. Right. Paralysis by analysis and try to like figure out exactly what needs to happen. And I've in a very short time in business, and I still need reminders every once in a while, right? You get stuck in those mindsets, but like in those moments, for whatever reason, in those big decisions, like we've always just fallen back on like, this is a decision we know we need to go, like we're being pushed here. Let's just trust that and like let everything else work out the way it's going to work out. And so far worked out.
Yeah. And do you feel like so I heard multiple things in there, and I love that
Yeah.
recap. So the multiple things, it sounds like and maybe this is creative license here, but it sounds like the intelligence that heals the body also can guide your decisions. Like people will call it intuition or things like that, right? But
yeah,
if God has a plan for your life and your body has capabilities that are, intrinsic to it to heal, you didn't do a balance sheet or like a cost analysis.
No.
What I heard was there was a decision point.
Yep.
And you did it proactively, which is amazing.
Yeah.
You did it proactively. So I do sometimes I don't use this as much with business owners. I use it for myself to think about this, but there's a formula for change. We do a lot of word formulas. So formula for change is dissatisfaction times vision plus first steps has to be greater than resistance.
Sure.
Right. So you had dissatisfaction with the size space you had in a vision for something larger, and the first steps, which were considerable in this case.
Yeah.
Right. You had commercial spaces to deal with, like leases to deal with.
Yeah.
But the dissatisfaction combined with the vision for what it could be, and the huge first steps you had to do was still greater than the resistance of doing those things.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, but there was, I think two business owners, we're more cerebral than we've ever been in culture.
Sure.
Like I need an explanation for these things,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not a lot of explanation for the things you've done on paper, but it's led to this, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So
it's been great.
You'd say intuition over logic in most cases as a business owner.
Yeah. And there's places for both, as we both know. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But for me personally, like if I get too stuck in my head and like kind of bogged down by that logical stuff, right, it then blocks it. I feel like it then detracts from and subtracts from my ability to be intuitive and kind of feel more or less like where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that for some people is like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, I don't like, why are you making this decision when this says you shouldn't?
Yeah.
Right. I guess it's just something that I've come to trust because it's something I've really worked on over the last decade plus, right, of doing what I do, right? Because in part of my process of taking care of people and adjusting them, there is like an intuition part to that, right, that I've learned to trust, right? And that I think, kind of being in kind of the overarching kind of philosophy for our business, but then for my life is like leaning into that, right? That intuition or that like, if you want to call it your intuition, chiropractic would call it your innate intelligence, right? That part of you that is super smart and running the show for you. How do we tap into that and be more guided to that because it's smarter than we're ever going to be?
Yeah.
Right. Other way of thinking about it is like, okay, well, God's got a plan for my life, right? And I am trying to be connected and in harmony with that. How do I then remove my logical mind from the equation, right, and allow that to work through me, right, and guide me?
You're really an artist, Zach. You're really more like a spinal artist,
Sure.
Really, like I'm just going to take your spine and use it as a canvas and creatively fit it where it has to go.
Sure, yeah, and it's people will watch me adjust from the outside looking in, and it doesn't look very. For some people, it's just like that, like. Wait, what? Like, there's so many other layers going to it, but it's because I've been doing it for so long. And I have great mentors that I've stayed connected with and learned from that have helped me get to the point where I can just let that kind of work through me, right? Where I'm out of my logical mind and like not letting that get in the way of like, is this right? Should I do that? And just letting that intuitive piece kind of come forth more.
It's a flow state.
Yeah.
More of a flow state.
Yeah. Right. And trying to bring that more into business of letting, and now here, it's like, I can't just like haphazardly just like let go of everything, right? There is a logical, we've got to look at numbers and do all this stuff, but then there's the opposite side of like, okay, now that we know that, how do I now remove myself out of it and just like here's the direction we're going, and then just let it happen and let that flow, right? And let it be, I don't want, easy is not simple, right? Simple doesn't mean easy, right?
Right.
But make it more, how can I simplify things, right?
Yeah.
Down for myself.
Yeah.
Because it can get, as you know, it can get business can get very complicated very quickly.
Yeah.
Right. and detracts from my ability to serve people when they're on my table.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's an element too of all this where, I mean, these are really high level business principles, or really, I think people chase these states of like flow state, or how do I make it simple? How to make these decisions that are guided. But really too, like, I think it's actually the mundane that gets people a lot of times, because you show up to work and you're just like, new patient, adjust, new patient, adjust, new patient, adjust. And you're just like in the trenches. And that's usually where people's minds go a little crazy too. Is like, they're overthinking things constantly while their hands are busy and their mind is off somewhere else doing that.
Sure.
Is there something you do with that specifically, or does that enter for you at all?
Oh, sure. I mean, especially being, a new business, we're constantly growing, we're changing, we're trying to figure out what works, right? So there's always parts of that kind of creep in, but I've developed from my training from my mentors, certain things that I do before I start adjusting, right? To kind of like drop that and like kind of let that go. And then subtle reminders for myself of like when I am like in that state, like going between people and doing all these things. So like if I find myself drifting there, of like getting myself like stop for a second, like wait, like get grounded again, like let all that go and then proceed, right? So definitely my mind still does wander for sure. I mean, as a business owner, I think your mind is always kind of
solving problems,
right? But like coming into that knowing, okay, that's probably going to happen today, but like, how can I do my best to minimize that?
Yeah.
Right. So I have those practices for myself, right? Coming into our serving hours, but then like, my cell phone is in my book bag in the back. Like it's not in my adjusting room, right? Like I have that stuff removed, right? To not add to the possible distraction of those things.
Wow.
Right. I have a computer there to help me like do notes and like check in on things when I need to, like in between people. But other than that, like those like are removed, so I don't have the oh hey man, like I could probably do this post really quick. Let me go like do this really now. I was like, no, that's probably gonna not great for my mental state of like adjusting people if I'm trying to do like a social media post.
Sure.
In the 5 to 10 minutes in between people that might pop up here and there, right? So trying to remove those distractions is what helps kind of keep me as close to that.
Yeah.
And then just like a little short, 15 seconds of like grounding myself again and then proceeding is kind of how I do my best to minimize those during the day.
Yeah. And it seems, so your office here is very intentional. Like it's very clearly laid out intentionally, and you put a lot of thought into the lights and how the lights are set up, which is pretty key for a practice called Luminous, right?
Absolutely.
But there's other things that your patients may not ever see, but definitely feel, which is like you're controlling your own emotional state, and that's how they're experiencing you as their clients as well. So the mentality of a business owner and what you're actually providing to people there is pretty special.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. And we all have stuff happen. We have lives, right? I've got a family, right? Things happen, like, but I have those practices to be able to like, okay, I've got to leave that at the door, right? Because that doesn't allow me to serve people the way I need to serve them if I'm bringing that into the adjusting space, right?
Yeah. Wow. Sure. That's awesome. I ask tough questions.
That's
what I do as a coach. So
I love it.
I like to get into this. So was there ever a point in your chiropractic school when you're studying to be a doctor, or as a business owner, where you thought this might not work?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Right. So I went to Life University in Marietta, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta.
Okay.
The only 4 years I haven't lived in Ohio was those years down in Atlanta. Loved it. I tell people all the time, like if there was ever anything happen where I had to absolutely go back to chiropractic school to keep doing it, I would do it all over again. Absolutely loved it. It was one of the most transformative 4 years of my life. But it's not easy, right? It's a graduate level program, right? Most people don't know that chiropractic school is 3.5 to 4 years post undergrad, right? So it's the equivalent. It's the same time commitment as going to medical school. It's not medical school, but it's the same time equivalent of like, you've got to have a 4-year degree, and then you've got 3.5 to 4 years of more schooling to walk across the stage and then be able to have a chiropractic degree, right? But in those 4 years, it's not easy. And there's some places we always, there's a kind of a, I don't know what you call it, kind of like a weed out portion of the program, right? So we were on quarters there. So, we basically switch classes every 11 weeks, right? So you had 11 weeks to get through these classes, and you move on to the next chunk, and you did that for 3.5 to 4 years. Okay. It was like fifth quarter, I think, in that program, how it was designed when I was there. When I graduated in 2017, so it's been a little while. Things may have changed, but when I was there, fifth quarter was like all the really super challenging, the first like really, really hard ones, all kind of bottlenecked into the same 11-week time period, right? And I just remember going like maybe halfway through that, and I'm just like, this sucks. Like, this really sucks. Like, this is not what I thought this was going to be, right? I had my life changed by a chiropractic adjustment, right? But I'm knee deep in pathology and CNS anatomy and like all these other like high level courses. I'm just like, I just want to change people's lives, man. That's all what I'm here. Like, let's do this thing, right? But it's like the steps, the hoops you have to jump through to get there. But man, I remember getting through that. That was the first point, and really the only point in chiropractic school where I was like, man, this sucks. Like, am I supposed to do this? Like, because this is just not it right now, right? And thankfully, like, I kept going, because soon after that conversation with myself, it was just like, no, like, remembering how I got there, right? And I don't remember what it was, a conversation with somebody, or I went to a lot of seminars outside of schools. I mean, something like that. There was like, nope, yep, I'm supposed to be here. And just kind of like got me refocused to like push through the hard stuff, right, to get to the end. And then even like in business, right? We opened our first practice 4 months after I graduated, right? And looking back on that, like, had no business opening a business at that point in my life, right? I was not ready, right? I did not, and it's not like a disclaimer to like not open your business right out of school, but I did not do the prep work I needed to do to get ready to be a business owner.
Sure.
Coming out of school.
Sure.
Right. Right. Because the point of chiropractic school, as it's laid out right now, is they're just trying to get you to pass boards, right? They very minimal on the business side, which is unfortunate, because a lot of chiropractors end up being business owners.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, there's not a super high success rate for that, right? So, and it just comes because we're not, like, most people don't have a business background coming into chiropractic. They're one like me, like, hey, I want more people on more tables more often so I can change more lives, right? Like, that's what I want to do, right? But there's a business side to it, right? So I had to learn that, but I wasn't ready there. And that business, inevitably, we were only open for about 1.5 years, right? So that's hard. It's like, goodness, I was like, well, I've got a young family that I'm trying to provide for, and this business thing is not working, right? And we had some other life stuff happen that was kind of like piling on top of it, but it was just like, man, like, I don't know if I'm cut out to do this thing, right? Which then led me into an associate position that I was in for about 5.5 years before opening Luminous, right? Which that time allowed me to just be a chiropractor, but then allowed kind of because I stay tapped into my mentors, and I still kind of really kind of stay entrenched in kind of like what got me into chiropractic in the first place, allowed the fire to create, kind of get stoked again, right? And it kind of led us to being here. But I was also in a better place of like, okay, I've learned, right? I know a little bit more now, and now we can kind of hit the ground running and really kind of push this thing forward to get it to be like a feasible, like functioning business, right? And I mean, it's functioning, and I know there's probably things I'm constantly like, okay, how can we be better? What do we need to do? How can we grow? What, all these things, right? And that's like just a journey that I think business owners are always on, right? Of automating that, of like pulling ourselves out of that, but like, how do we create that to get the ball moving, right? But yeah, man, those were like the two like inflection points in my career before I was like, oh man, like, I'm not sure.
What did I sign up for?
Yeah, but obviously, like, super grateful that I only let that be like a passing thought, and kept moving on. I think part of that is just like a personality trait of like, the desire to create something and like build that,
Yeah.
and just like not wanting to like give up on it before I like gave it like a real shot type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard multiple important points there that were like key business principles. One is staying tapped into mentors.
Yeah.
Which is an active process.
Oh, for sure.
That the person who wants the mentorship engages in. It's not up to the mentors to follow you, but you're saying, I need to keep drawing in information.
Yeah.
And I'll tell people when they're like, I'm interested in studying with this person or being part of this or being in this church or whatever the organization it is. Like whatever the leader is, find out who their leader is, because that's what's rolling down to you. Yep. And if they don't have one, then you're in a stagnant pool of water, stagnant pool of knowledge. So that's huge. And then also it's those were also decision points. Like how much am I going to let this get in my head? How much am I going to let? And we make a lot of choices, especially young in our life, of uninformed optimism.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where we're like, I have this vision or goal or plan, and I'm going to go for it without knowing probably even half of what it all entails.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's, one of the things that changed my life to understand is like most of us dream, and then we make a goal out of that dream. We say that this is something I'd really like because I've been dreaming about it a lot.
Yeah.
Make a goal out of it, and then we go straight to action on it. Straight to action. When the real formula is dream, goal, learn, plan, action.
Sure.
Because the learning, if you set a goal, you're basically setting a future you that you're going to become to have that thing or be that person, right? Which means there's inherently a knowledge gap.
Oh, for sure.
There has to be, or else you would have already done it. Then it's just a to-do list, right? So there's an inherent knowledge gap. And if you make a plan without having the knowledge satisfied, then you're making an uninformed plan, which for our 20s got us by.
Yeah.
But with a lot of bumps and headaches, right? Yeah. A lot of sort of scares or hard decision points to come to.
Oh, for sure.
So
for sure.
But you persevered, which again is like top 10% of business owners, which is why you're still here. It's fantastic.
And it's never, I think I found out it's like it's almost never how you're going to expect it to go, right? And it's how I talk to people about their journey with us, right? Their healing journey. It's like everybody wants to start at point A and just go directly to point B, right? In this straight line with no obstacles and nothing, right? When in reality, it's full of ups, downs, twists, turns, like all this stuff that eventually gets you to the point where you're like, oh, hey, this is working, right? It's just how I believe, like, especially for healing in our body, but then even for business too, it's like, it's there, but you just have to then let it work. And there's going to be, because nothing's perfect and the road's never going to go the way we want it to, right? But in my belief system of trust and knowing that things are happening for us, right? I try to keep that mindset, right? For all aspects, right? Helping people on their journeys, business, all these things, like all these things are happening for us for a reason, right? Or how I'd like to think of a purpose, right? And it's not our reason sometimes to fully try to define what that purpose is in the moment, right? Because I think how I like to kind of distinguish that is like, for us rationally, logically, to try to like define that is trying to say like, this is happening for this reason. Well, okay, maybe. But then if we allow it to play out and allow it to kind of the experience, the journey, the whatever it is to kind of distill, if you will, drip by drip, we eventually come to the purpose behind it, which I think for us as any point in our life as human beings to like find that purpose is outside of our logical, rational mind, right? We have to allow that purpose to show up for us to find our way to that, right? And that just comes back down to more of that trust and that intuition side of things.
And it made me think of something just now too when you were saying that, Zach, is I think if you want to connect the intelligences, if you want to say that, right? There's a flow state for your adjustments and for your business decisions that you're allowing more into. But you have been sort of guided in these principles and ideas and feelings, and the same healing that takes place in our body is also the healing that is also the process of the seasons change. So we're experiencing autumn in Ohio, which in a lot of ways you look at and go, this isn't good.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Sure.
wet, it's cold, it looks like it never goes past 7 a.m. every morning. Like it's just gray the entire day long. And then you get to winter and like, well, everything died. And logically, if you don't know what seasons are like, you say, this is really bad.
Yeah.
Like, will anything ever come back? But in the healing journey, there are cycles. And then also in seasons, there are cycles, and it makes way for new green growth in the spring.
Sure.
So if you're going to say all these things are designed and created or connected by intelligences, those things, that what's healing or rejuvenating the world is also what's working in you as well.
Absolutely.
So it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But most people don't want to do winter.
Yes.
Most people don't want the cold.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a really funny. I wrote this question last night with no prep, with no idea what we were really going to talk about.
Yeah.
How do you make decisions when logic and intuition disagree?
Funny how that happens.
Right? Funny how that happens.
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know if I have a logical answer for you, to be honest with you. Right? I don't know, like trying to distill that into words. Right?
Yeah.
Man, it's just come down to a lot of the mentorship that I've had, a lot of the training that I've done, and a lot of the teaching of the training that I once took that I continue to do, is how to bring that intuition trust into every aspect of life, right? It just always comes back to knowing, like, okay, hey, when logic is telling me this, but my intuition's telling me this, okay, what's the disconnect? And a lot of the times for me, the disconnect between, okay, logic is saying this, but my intuition's saying this, is my logical brain is always going to go more often than not towards what's the thing that is less scary, going to keep me safe and protect me from potential failure, embarrassment, whatever you want to call it, right? What's that safe decision? Logic a lot of times is going to take me there. Intuition is going to be more heart driven and like, hey, what's the decision that's going to kind of like move us forward? And it's like, is really tapped into our foundation, our beliefs, or like, where is it going to take me on this? Like, hey, this is telling me to go this way because I think really in my heart of hearts that this is really the decision that we need to make, even though it feels really freaking uncomfortable and it might suck for a second. Like, I need to make this one, but my logical side of my brain is always going to try to keep me safe.
Yeah.
Right. And that's more or less trying to get that understanding of like coming to that decision quicker.
Yeah.
Right. Because like I'm somebody that, for me personally, I know I make my best decisions when it's not a snap decision. Right. If you ask me to make a decision and I'm not really like in an even keel, like calm state to like give you an answer, it's probably not going to be my best answer. Like if I have to like pushed up against the deadline, I'm like, I need to make it now, I'm going to get stuck in that. Like, I'm not really sure. If I have hey, give me 24 hours to like think about that, I can probably come back to you and give you like, hey, we're going to do this type of thing, which doesn't always work, right? Which is great to have a partner in business or a coach in business to help you through it, right? My wife, Jessica, is the exact opposite. She does really good on making that intuitive, like snap decision of like, no, we need to do this. I'm like, awesome. I'm going to ride with that for you for now until we get to like, maybe we need to come back this way, right? So having kind of two different personality types there is always great. But I think that's more or less kind of how I try to navigate that of like, am I trying to like avoid something and just like make a logical decision of like, well, no, that doesn't. This makes the most sense. But that making sense might detract from potential expansion, growth, insight, whatever it might be that intuitive decision is trying to lead me towards.
Sure. One of the best phrases I've ever heard to explain that is dry, safe, and warm. Like your brain, and most of us know where we're sleeping, what we're going to eat today. So it's not like survival now for us is not like a matter of physical endangerment. It's emotional endangerment. And so your logical brain is scanning for all kinds of emotional threats. What will I be embarrassed? Will I fail? How do I save face? What will this mean for me in my little bubble? And that's very, very interesting, very on point. And funny how like there's that pull between maybe head and heart of like my brain wants this, but my heart is saying this thing. And then how do you differentiate those? And usually I think giving yourself time is a big key to it.
Yeah. Same mentor, add this in really quick, that I, kind of drove the name of Luminous, right? He was also very famous of driving into us, like, the greatest, hardest, longest journey that you will ever go on as a person is the 18 inches to go from your head to your heart. Right? To get yourself out of this and more into this is really freaking hard, right? Because the world tells you to do this, right? And we want to stay this because we want to stay safe, right? We're all pre-programmed to want to survive, right? But as awesome as our body and nervous system is, it can't tell the difference between the physical and the emotional harm, if you want to call it that, danger, right? It responds the same way, right?
Yeah, a phrase we pass around a lot inside of my group of peers is what you say to yourself about yourself when you're by yourself determines your outcomes, determines your experience of the world. What you're saying to yourself when no one else is listening and no one else can even adjust it for you. That's what's going to be the ultimate deciding factor. Maybe last question here as we kind of wind down. If every entrepreneur treated their business like their body, what would be different?
I think we'd have a lot of failing businesses.
I expected that from a doctor.
If I'm being completely honest from you, right? Because it's so easy as a business owner, and myself included in times, to say, I'll get to that later because I've got X, Y, Z things that I need to do for the business to move this forward. But then next thing we know, you can be 3, 5, 7, 10 years into it and your business is like awesome, but your body's falling apart and now you can't enjoy anything that you've just built over the last however long, right? And that's just not even just business owners. We're focused on business, but that's just like people in general, right? In our world and our time that we live in, is just like everything outside of put energy, resources, all that stuff towards everything, but like the thing that's actually going to allow us to enjoy all that stuff, right? And that disconnect of just like, and I think it just comes down in multiple factors, but I think a lot of it just comes down to the disconnect in the disempowerment of our society and what it tells us and how we need to act, right? Of like robbing us and like hypnotizing people into like believing that they have no power over it, right? So if we're talking about the health of like, hey, you have no like say in your health and like what those outcomes are. It just is what it is. And when stuff hits the fan, if you will, we've got a pill, potion, lotion for you to just like take this and it'll just like take the edge off enough to like where you're not noticing it, but you're not like really doing super great. We're just going to kind of keep you in this mundane, like middle gray area and you're not going to experience any of the highs and lows that we're designed to experience. Right. Versus like what we try to do and like what you're trying to do for business owners, empower them and know like, hey, you actually do have a say in the equation. And actually it's the most important part of it is like for our health, it's like the most important part of it is you actually taking an active stand in your health, making decisions that are best for you, finding the team of practitioners that is going to empower you in that and believes that you can be healthy, right? Potentially if you desire to without drugs, medication and things like that, right? Because it's my belief that our truest, fullest expression of our health comes from doing the things without relying on the consistent chronic overuse of medication and drugs, right? Because they're just inherently not designed to do that, right? How can we build that team to bring that out of us, right? That's what we are here for at Luminous, is like being part of that team for people, right? To help them experience their health, their life to the best of their ability, right? As God created them to do it, right? I don't think God created any of us to just be born and then just whittle away and just fall apart. That doesn't make sense to me, right? No. I believe we were created in God's image, and I don't think God's image is one that just whittles away and falls apart over time. So that never that doesn't line up for me, right? That doesn't compute. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So let me helping people just kind of, for most people, is reconnecting to that, right? Because if you look at kids, if you look at babies, they're just like full of energy, they're thriving, they're loving life. And then at some point, life comes in and, right, weighs down on them and detracts from that. So a lot of it is just like a reconnection to that innate ability to do all those things, right? And I think then it kind of falls over into like the business side of things of like, yeah, that's also aligns with a lot of business owners, myself included, is like we can get really weighed down by what we should be doing, right? And like, oh, we got to do all these things for the businesses. Like, I don't have time to go. I have time to make lunch or anything like that. Let me go grab this something really fast, or I don't have time to work out today, so I'm not like all that. But then it all adds up eventually, and then you're however long into the future, and like, how the heck did I get here?
Yeah.
Right. I've got a great business, but my body feels like crap.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it takes you time to dig out of that hole.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I'll be healthy now. It's like,
for sure,
you'll be healthy in a year and a half after you take care of all the
yes,
pain and punishment you put on your body.
Exactly.
I had a sort of a wake up call because I was kind of blue collar raised, and hard work gets you everything.
Sure.
And I realized at one point, as I was building out an organization and I was doing a lot of sales and doing a lot of marketing and recruiting, and I heard somebody who was outside of my sphere of influence say on a podcast, if you're trying to race like a high performance vehicle, but you're giving yourself Honda Civic treatment as a mechanic, how long is that going to work for you? And I mean, if you're Formula One or you're NASCAR, like you're stopping in the middle of the race, to get everything taken care of on your vehicle, right? So like, even if you think most business owners will brag about how little sleep they get, but even if you sleep 8 hours a night, how much was your REM? Like, how was your quality of sleep? Because if you wake up still tired, that's a problem by itself.
Yeah. So
then if you add those things, low nutrition, not hitting the right things in your nutrition, low sleep, but you're trying to race Formula One in business, like that's going to grind to a halt really fast. It doesn't compute
very well. No, yeah.
Well, and Brad Sugars, our founder, was recently said, he's like, point out to me what grinds in nature. You can keep grinding in your business if you can show me one thing in nature that grinds. Ain't nothing that grinds.
No, it's all guided.
It's guided, and it's systematic, and it has intuition built into it and intelligence built into it. So, yeah, man. Anything that you want to close out with? Any thoughts? What do you want to leave us with Luminous?
Just like anybody listen, just not even from a business standpoint, but just from a personal outlook on your life, right? Even if you think that you're like, oh, I'm doing good. I talk to people all the time, oh, I'm doing great. Like, I'm like the best. I think I'm like at my best, and all these things. I'm like, okay, like, what are you doing? Like, how did you get here? What's the process? What's your, what are you doing for yourself? And it's like, okay, like, that's good, but like, do you think there could be more? And that's the question I'll ask people. It's like, do you think it could be better than it is? Right. And a lot of people don't ever really think about that, especially for their health. Like, even if they're like technically healthy, right? My question would be like, how do you know? Right? What are you looking at that's telling you you're healthy? Because if you're just basing that off of like, well, I don't hurt, I don't have any pain, it's like, I would invite you to maybe reconsider that and understand that that's not the greatest indicator of health, right? Because the symptomatology is just our body's fire alarm and how it communicates with us when things are going wrong, right? How do you know you're healthy, right? But then what are you doing on a proactive basis to continue to keep yourself at your best, right? Giving your body the support it needs to be at its best, right? To your point, that Formula One, the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, the high performance vehicle analogy, right? Right, there is a lot of time, energy, resources that go into even just getting it to the point where it can drive, let alone perform at that high of a level, right? So what are we doing to be at our best, if that's what you desire? And look, a lot of people, some people, they don't want that. I am perfectly fine with that. I'm not going to force anybody to it, right? I just want you to know that it's possible, right? That even if you feel great, that you might be actually able to experience another level of clarity, energy, focus, performance that you didn't know was possible until you engaged in something like maybe chiropractic care, right? And then I have that conversation with people all the time. It's like, hey, you're probably going to come along in this process and be like, I didn't even know that this could happen. Like, yeah, it's because you had all this stuff built up over the years that your body just needed to like deal with finally. And when you get that out of the way, you clear the uh, you know, clear everything out. Now you're just like, wipe the slate clean. Well, now you're starting fresh, and it's like, whoa, I didn't even know this. Well, that's normal. That's actually normal. You're, crappy 6 to 7 hours of sleep every night, depending on 4 cups of coffee to get you through the day, and barely making it to 8 p.m. before you crack. Like that might be your normal, right? But that's not how you were designed to go through life, sure. Right? And if you desire for more, there are resources out there to help you, sure. Right? In your health, right? Or for you, like in business, right? It's like, hey, there's other things we can do to like really get you to the point where you're experiencing your life the way that you are probably, in my belief, intended to, and thrive, right? Not just survive.
It's funny you mentioned babies too, because it made me think when you're saying babies and what's normal, it's normal for babies to be very flexible. They have no trauma in their bodies yet. It's normal for babies to stop the show to say, I'm hungry. I have a need.
Yeah.
They don't do it that nicely.
Yeah.
But they do it,
sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so babies are actually experts on taking care of themselves.
Oh, yeah. When they need a need, they're going to let you know until it's met.
And maintaining equilibrium. They're really good at maintaining equilibrium because realistically, they probably run completely by the intuition of the body, right? There's nothing else. You can't tell me no. I'm going to tell you I want food, right? My rule goes here. Yeah. So we do have to adjust as we get older, but maybe we could learn from babies and be a little more adamant on taking care of ourselves.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah. Dr. Zach, thank you for the time.
Yeah, man. Caleb,
Appreciate you.
Yeah, for sure.